Hello, Carl here with today's Sustainability Theory News. Over at Food Tank, a new report examines the links between energy, food, and water. Now, I've thought for years that energy, food, and water are interconnected, mostly because we use a lot of energy and water to produce our food. So, if we could create a more sustainable food system, then that means we can solve the water and energy problems much more easily. Next story from ReFed. 27 solutions to food waste. This is a follow up to yesterday's story on a way to add $100 billion of economic value to our economy through eliminating food waste. And this breaks down each individual idea, which they want to spend about $1.8 billion in taxpayer money to fund. So it's up to you guys as the taxpayers to understand, is this really worth it? And of course, there are a ton of benefits to eliminating food waste. Podcast over at Permaculture Voices, growing from 30 customers to over 6,000. Sherry Salatin starting, running, and growing Polyface Farms Buying Club. Now, this looks like an interesting podcast. I've read the summary. Talks about how they manage their inventory, how they started their buying club, how their buying club grew, and how it allowed them to grow their farm. Over at Science Daily, a story on developing sustainable food cities. This is over at Bournemouth University, and talks about building cities around the idea of health, individual and healthy well-being. Nutritional well-being is what they say here. Over at the Natural Building blog, cracking the code, tiny houses and building code. Anyone who lives out in the countryside knows that working and building small farm structures is really part of the job. But more and more building codes are encroaching upon our land and our lives. And, for better or worse, we're going to have to find a way to work with it. Over at Deep Green Permaculture, there's a story, a little news piece that Sky News produced on how to make the most of a small space. Mother Earth News, building a coop, a small do-it-yourself chicken coop. Simple frames on both ends, little wiring for a little bit of framing, and then just put some steel roofing over on top of that. Simple enough, right? Anyone who's handy with a hammer and a screw gun should be able to finish something like that in a couple of days if they have some help. Maybe a week or two on your own. All right, and last story, tips for training goats to electric net fences. Now, I'm skeptical of the, feasibility of this, since goats can jump pretty high. I imagine jumping over that fence might not be too hard, but they suggest training them from the moment they are kids. Small goats, of course. Put them right next to the fence, allow them to touch it, realize it's hot, so they never get their heads stuck in the holes and then start choking themselves. And they feel that once the goats believe that, the barrier is an actual barrier, that they won't even test it. Sort of like tying up your horse to a real tiny, tiny branch and hoping they realize, hey, this is enough to hold me back. Well, that's it for today. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below.